Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Polsinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today. And today we're going to be launching into another solo episode. Okay, so recently I have, really been, I feel like kind of digging in again and going through some of my own things. If you've been following the podcast, you've probably seen it on my stories and stuff like that. I also recently found out that I am in the swing of perimenopause. And so emotions are very rampant. And it's been like a huge disruption to my body, right? Especially for someone that feels like she was finally getting to a space of like being level in her life and getting to a point where like, okay, like all these great things are happening. More of the speaking is going forward. Talking with law enforcement has been amazing, by the way. And then all of a sudden, like everything started bubbling again. And so I've been doing a lot of research and all those good things to figure out what the hell is going on with me. And so it's okay. It's, it's just being a woman. No, there's a lot of actual information that's out there, and I am very blessed for the people that have shared it with me. People I've had on the podcast that are focused on it, like Lisa Boat, who I had on here twice about menopause and perimenopause and things like that. And so anyway, very blessed to have a lot of people on my side. And so over the last couple of weeks, it's kind of got me thinking that like we tend to judge ourselves based on the words that other people use, right? And even when we are talking about ourselves, we define ourselves based on these words, essentially. And I had a podcast guest on here a while back who did an amazing job. His name was Matthew Brackett, of like really breaking down what specific words mean. And he was talking about leadership and power and what the root of those words originally meant, and then how we've kind of transitioned them to today. And it just got me thinking that like maybe I need to be more aware of what words truly do mean, right? So that I have a better idea of the way that I am speaking about myself or others or speaking to others. And then the idea came while I was in the shower. Yes, I am a shower thought person. And this idea of I need to do an episode, and there's a couple of words that I really want to focus on, right? I mean, there's 10,000 words out there that we can use. People talk about trauma and strength and resiliency. And anyway, you can go on and on and on, right? And what I realized is, while yes, I understand that when we're talking about ourselves, when they're introducing ourselves to other people, when we're writing a bio and we're trying to capture people's attention and things like that, we tend to use these words, right? Because these are the words that everybody knows. These are the words we want to be defined by, right? Or at least for it to make sense to people where we're coming from, right? Even when I have my bio read and I'm talking about it or speaking to other people, I speak about the resiliency that I had. One of the words that I tend to not use is the strength behind it. And I focus more on the courage aspect. And for me, the word courage has a lot more depth to it than strength. Because here's the thing, when you're dealing with difficult situations, when you are not in the best place and you're struggling, you feel like you're failing, strength is not the word that generally comes to mind, right? We think weak. Weak tends to be the word that comes to mind. And along with that, we just kind of like phew into the gutter, right? About how we're failing, how we're not strong. And a lot of times you hear people use the term like, oh my gosh, you're so strong, or you're so strong for getting through this. You have so much strength beneath you. And I love that, right? And I would like to redefine how we use the word strength and in what capacity that we're using it. Because what I realized was for some of the things that I did, for some of the things that I went through, for some of the things that I was working on or am working on healing on, strength is not the word that came to mind. It's not the word that I felt connected with. You know, when people say, oh, they're the strong one, there's almost a feeling, or at least for me, of this expectation of how you are to then handle situations, right? Because you are the strong one, because you have a lot of strength. In my personal opinion, and maybe this is just me, but I kind of equated that with then I can't break down and I can't have the emotions and I can't have bad days and there is no failing, right? Because when you're strong, that's not what happens, right? When you're strong, you push forward and you're brave and so on and so on and so on. Now, granted, some of this and the way that I see it or other people may see it may also be tied to movies and TV shows and stuff that we've watched and stories that we've heard, and also just the way that our culture has defined these terms. But unfortunately, because of the way that these terms have been defined, whether spoken out loud or just kind of silently understood, it is debilitating some of us, you know. I talk about this from a stance of someone that was in an abusive relationship for 10 years. And let me tell you, strength is not the words that came to mind when I was in that situation. And leaving that situation, strength again was not the word that came to mind with what I was dealing with and going through. And every time somebody would say, oh, but you're so strong, I felt like I was failing when I was having a breakdown. I felt like I was failing to that word, to that expectation when I didn't know what was going on, when I would break down and cry at night because I didn't know what was going on with my life. Strength, being strong to me had its own definition and connotations to it. Now, for you, it may not, right? For you, you may understand what that word means to you. You may love using that word, and there's nothing wrong with that. What I want to speak to is understanding how we choose to define a word and being aware of how that word is also defining us. And because of the way that we define those words or we feel like those words mean, is that shutting you down? Is that keeping you playing small? Is that making you feel like you're a failure? Like nothing you do is right? Do you feel like you are living up to an invisible expectation because of that word that either you or other people have tied to you? And if that's the case, let me give you the permission to set yourself free from that meaning. Because a lot of the words that we use today is actually not how it was used hundreds of years ago. They've been derived from different things, from, European standards and Germanic language to Latin. Like there is so much that's tied into it. And again, because of the way that we as a society or as a culture have been using these terms, that's what we go with. And unfortunately, there's a lot that's tied behind those. Let me give you an example. Weak. You ever heard anybody use that term? Oh, they're just a weak individual, or you have a lot of weakness because you cry, you are weak. That is a term that I personally have felt like had a detachment to it. And so every time I would hear that word, and even when I would use that word, there is a negative connotation that's with that, right? And here's the interesting part. In all honesty, if you really think about it, if you break it down, words are just words. There is no good, there is no bad, there is no positive, there is no negative. We, as a culture, we, as a society, have laid that foundation onto that word. A word is just a word. It's used to describe, it's used to present an action item. There's nothing else to it. Yet, I guarantee you, when you hear certain words, you have a feeling connected to it. You may have a memory connected to it. You may have a trigger that's connected to it. So if we look at the word weak or weakness, right? At its core meaning of this word, it is lacking physical strength, power, or effectiveness. Lacking physical strength, power, or effectiveness. It has also been used to describe something that is not able to withstand pressure or strain. Now think about that for a moment. Something that is not able to withstand pressure or strain. I guarantee every single person listening to this podcast, you have endured some type of pressure or strain within your life. And I bet you got past that pressure or that strain, or you dealt with it. So technically, by definition, you're not weak, right? I mean, if you think about it, if we were literally wanting to be super logical, super, A plus B equals C, if you are enduring currently or have in the past some form of pressure or strain in your life and you got past it, then you're not weak. So again, how we use these words really does make a difference. And you'll hear this in neuro-linguistic programming. It's called NLP, which, by the way, I have never taken. I've just talked to a lot of people that have, but it was something that I didn't understand for a really long time about the power of your words and the meanings behind that. And then when I started thinking about these words that I've attached to myself, I realized that I had created that definition, not the dictionary, not the word itself. I had created it, whether it was because that's how I felt or because other people had said that. And so that became my belief, whatever the case may be. That is how I associate that word with me. And let me tell you, I have been through a hell of a lot of personal pressure and strain. And I have also made it through every single freaking one of those things. So guess what? I am not weak. Now, did I have a personal moment of not knowing if I was going to be able to get past it? Yes. But that doesn't define me as a weak individual, which means if I'm crying or upset about something or an emotion is coming up, by definition, that is not weak. Because if that's how you deal with your pressure, if that's how you deal with that strain, is by getting emotional and then moving past it, well, then you have withstood the pressure and the strain. So therefore, you're not weak. Do you see what I'm kind of getting at here? I think it's an interesting concept that I wanted to kind of play around with because I think about the things that I tell myself, right? As much work as I've done on myself, I still have days, especially right now, with my brain going bananas. And it's really easy to get into a space of, I'm an F up. I am no good. I can't do this. Fill in the blank, right? But when I took the moment to relate it back to the word, I was like, okay, well, that doesn't really match up. And I think for me, it's a way for me to get out of my head, right? Because if I'm saying like, why is there such a weakness when it comes to XYZ? And then I can think about it and I'm like, well, it's not really a it's not really a weakness because like I've done this before and I know I'm going to get through it again. So just a moment of being human. A huge reminder that I have had to give myself so much lately, so much that we are all human. And so, by definition, we have what is considered flaws. I just consider it uniqueness, right? Designed by your own path, whatever you'd like to call it. But again, I think that we are allowing words to define us and put pressure on us more than they should. They're just words. Another word that I looked up, right? We were talking about this in the beginning, strong. Strong. Let me put my piece of paper up here so that I can read it because it just fell. And yes, I did not memorize all of this. That's so strong, right? The word strong. So when I looked up the word strong, I was really curious to understand the origin. And here, this is really funny. So strong actually came from European roots. The original term acquainted to strong was tight, taut, and stiff. What? What? Tight, taut, and stiff. Okay. How the hell did we get to where we're at now with strength? So, anyway, as it continued to move through culture, the Old English modified it to the idea of physical power, bravery, and severity. Physical power, bravery, and severity. How do we go from tight, taut, and stiff to physical power and bravery? What? So here's the thing. If we're tying it to bravery based on Old English, right? Then if you're brave enough to face your demons, if you're brave enough to pick yourself back up after a failure, if you're brave enough to continue to push on when everybody tells you you can't. If you're brave enough to heal from your traumas, well, then you are one strong person. Think about that for a second. Because if bravery is tied to it, you're brave by approaching, attacking, and moving forward. In modern English, we actually continued to modify it because, why not? And it turned into a core meaning of physical or mental power. I'm going to go back to that power thing again, and includes connotations of intensity, influence, and resilience. I'm not really sure how intensity and influence match with resilience. So if anybody, if anybody's like a word person and like understands this, like please by all means comment, send me a message, let me know because I'm just going off of what I understand, and I was a little confused by that one. But do you see how like European roots, it was one, Old English pushed it to another, and the modern English continued to modify and add to it, right? And even in that, we attach strong or strength to resilience. So all the words kind of overlap. In my opinion, they almost feel like they're like intertwined with each other. Yeah. So again, if you have dealt with demons, if you have dealt with failure, if you have dealt with healing trauma, whether it's yours or your family's, if you have pushed yourself to achieve things that you didn't think were possible or met the goals that you've been pushing for, then you're strong as hell, right? Because that takes mental power, bravery, and resilience. Three words that by definition are attached to the word strong. How cool is that? I love being able to put a spin on something that is so easily attached to a negative point because I was in that space for so long in my life. Even after I got out of my abusive relationship, there's so many people like, oh my gosh, you're so brave. You're so strong. I was like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I feel like the weakest link and a complete failure as both a person and a mother for the longest time. And I know, people say this because we're trying to make the other person feel better. It didn't work for me because I didn't see myself as that. So I'd smile. "Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, okay. But there was never an agreement to it because in my brain, there was no way that I was strong because I was screwing everything up. Or at least I felt like that, right? So we go back to feeling weak, which apparently by definition, I was withstanding the pressure and holding on. So I was not weak. And because I was displaying bravery and mental power and resilience, I really was considered a strong one. Another word, resilience. I think that that's like the word of the year. No, nobody else. Like resilience is being used everywhere, everywhere in the speaking world, in the coaching world. Like we are resilient. I have a resilient past. Like, okay, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty sure it's in my bio somewhere about being resilient from my past. So there's nothing wrong with that word. I just think it's funny when society latches on to like one or two words or like a phrase and it becomes so overused that I'm like, do you even know why you're using that word? Or we're just going with it because everybody okay, that's fine. We'll just go with it because everybody else is going with it, right? I crack myself up. No, I'm not trying to give anyone crap for using the word resilience at all. I actually don't mind the word resilience. Like I said, strength, being strong. I had a hard time with that one for a really long time. It's still not a favorite word for me to use when I'm describing myself, when I'm sharing my story, when I'm talking to people. It's not really, it's not the word that I of choice that I go to, right? And so resilience, which is actually from Latin, originally meant to rebound or jump back. Simple enough. Rebound or jump back. Here's something I found really interesting, though, about the word resilience. Did you know that this word was initially used in material science? That was it. That's what it was used for. To describe the ability of a substance to return to its original shape after deformation. So, like, this wasn't even a word that anybody used anywhere. It was literally in material science to describe something of substance that was able to turn to its original form after deformation. Now, when I think about that in the original term, and I think about the word resiliency, I'm like, well, that sure as hell doesn't describe me because while yes, I did have the ability to bounce back, I did not return to my original shape. At least I don't feel like I did. I mean, I guess physically, right? No, but I mean, like the more that I learned, the more that I healed, the more that I went through things and started discovering things, I feel like I am completely different. I don't feel like I was molded back into who I originally was. I'm actually better. So if we think about that, when we think about resilience and we think about the Latin term, I don't know, kind of interesting. Now, it was adopted in the 20th century in psychology to move into more of the personal development space, right? Of someone who can bounce back, someone who deals with something and still comes out on the other side. So, but I thought that was really interesting. And I didn't realize that resilience was not a term that was used until the 20th century. What? When psychology adopted it. Now, makes sense, right? And if you think about it, we all experience certain times where we don't feel ourselves, right? We feel like we've lost ourselves. We feel like we've completely failed at everything, or we don't feel human. And then when you deal with those demons and you deal with those failures and you grow from it and you do something different, you did have the ability to bounce back, to come back from what mentally you felt was a deformation. So every single one of us is resilient because by definition, it doesn't state how deformed the substance was, right? Just that it was deformed. So if you went through something small, you've been resilient. If you went through something huge, you're definitely resilient. There is no term that describes a measurable space of it that this is what makes you resilient. Oh, well, because you went through XYZ, or you went through these many traumas, you are a resilient individual. No, no. We as a society, we as a culture are the ones that are trying to define that. I did it myself. When I first decided that I wanted to really speak out against domestic violence, that I wanted to start sharing my story to put light on a very dark situation that a lot of people do not like to speak about. I remember sitting in the room with the director of our local domestic violence center. Her name is Erica. She's phenomenal, by the way. And my old caseworker from when I had used the domestic violence center 10 years previously. And I remember pitching this idea and talking about this, and they were all for it. And they're like, "My gosh, this would be amazing, and think you'd be great at it," and all this. And then I was like, you know what, though? There are so many people that have been through worse when I think of domestic violence. There are so many that experience far greater turmoil, those that lost their lives. Like maybe my story isn't enough, which they immediately replied with, "Why would you ever compare your story to someone else's? To make your story less than what it is? Because if you went through it, it's important to you. Just like that other person that went through it, it was important to them. And does that mean that those that went through less than you don't matter?" I'm like, well, no. Okay. Well, then it doesn't mean that those that have been through worse matter more than you. So something I want to speak to you about. No matter what your story is, no matter your traumas, no matter your failures, no matter how many times you've picked yourself up or haven't had to pick yourself up, your story is your story. And your story is defined by your experience, not anyone else's. It doesn't make your story less, and it doesn't make your story more. It's your story. It's neutral. And I think that sometimes, again, as humans, we get into this comparison where if we've experienced too much, we don't understand why this person didn't experience enough. And if we haven't experienced much, we don't understand, why did it get thrown to this person? Why haven't I seen that? Why haven't I been able to grow? And when we do that, we're belittling our own story. We're making it less important. But it's your story. So your story is important to you, not everyone else. And we need to get back to that, of making our own stories, our own lives important to us, regardless of what anyone else thinks. And I get some people can take this as being very selfish, and I'm not looking at it to be that way. But what I don't want you to do is to downplay the things that you have been through because, well, this person had it worse. You're right. There are a lot of people in this world that have things a lot worse than we do. That means we should have gratitude for where we are at, and gratitude for the things that we have been through, and gratitude for the lessons that we have learned. Not that our story isn't important, so we shove it to the side. You're missing the whole point. So don't shove your story to the side. And don't define it by being weak or being strong, resiliency or not, bravery or not. You have to define it by what you internally feel like makes sense, right? If you know you've been through hard times and you're out on the other side, good for you. You're not where this person is at your age. Well, they probably didn't experience what you did. That's their path, and you have yours. That doesn't make you less because you're not at the same space. None of us are supposed to be. This societal norm of what we're supposed to do at certain ages and what we're supposed to, who we're supposed to be with, and children and not children, or the job of your dreams, or living on your whatever. Why are we allowing society to dictate? Because that's just a blanket statement. Now, yes, some people by the age of 25 want to be married, and that's wonderful. And if you haven't made it to that spot, or you didn't feel like you found the right person, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe there's something you need to heal within you before that person comes along. Maybe there's something you're supposed to do, and because of that, being in a relationship won't allow you to do that. It doesn't make it wrong. It's just your path. All right, I got one more word that I want to break down for you, and this is by far one of my favorite words: courage. This is the term that I use a lot in place of strength or strong. Because I personally feel that you can be courageous and you can have courage even when you feel weak. So, courage derives from the Latin word cor, which means heart. And initially, it was referred to as the heart as the seat of emotions and temperament. So courage was known as the heart, which was the seat of emotions and temperament. You know what's really interesting is when I think about that, I talk a lot about learning to think with my heart, learning to think with my emotions instead of being so stuck in my head, being so stuck in this logical space. And if you are listening to what I'm saying, it sounds like way back in the day that we also were defining the heart as the center. And yet now we stay away from the heart and the emotions as much as we possibly can because our brain should be making the right decisions, right? But our brains are a machine. And we are emotional beings. And so when we disconnect from the heart, we're missing out on a lot. Courage later evolved to encompass the spirit and the state of mind. I love this. The spirit and the state of mind. And it was linked to inner strength and the willingness to face difficulty, danger, and pain. Does that not feel all-encompassing with strength and resilience and bravery? Linked to inner strength and the willingness. Notice it did not say the destruction or the completion, the willingness to face difficulty, danger, and pain. We have all, at one point in our lives or another, faced some type of difficulty, danger, or pain. You are a courageous being. Think about that for a moment. Because when we go back to the word weak, right, it means not able to withstand pressure or strain. But courage means we had the willingness to face difficulty, danger, and pain, which is, right, a form of pressure that is put on us for whatever reason. So here's the thing. When you feel like you are weak, when you feel like you are not sure if you have the ability to withstand whatever pressure is coming at you, whatever strain is coming at you, whatever pain is coming at you, remember the definition of the word courage specifically is tied to the willingness, not the completion. The willingness to face difficulty, danger, and pain. And sometimes that's all you've got. And that is all that you need is your own courage, your own inner strength, and your willingness to face it. Not your completion of, your willingness to face. And that is why I deeply believe that you can be courageous and still be weak, that you can be courageous and not feel strong. Because courageous and courage is the willingness to go there. And I know that whatever failures you have dealt with, whatever trauma that you have been through, whatever you have seen in your lifetime, even if you have not completed it, even if you have not healed with it, even if you have not dealt with it, the fact that you have a willingness to take a look at it, that you have a willingness to sit down and say, okay, something's got to change. That right there, that makes you a courageous individual, even when you feel like the weakest link. So I hope that in my little English lesson, that you got something from this, that maybe your wheels are turning, right? That you're thinking about the words that you use and the definitions that you have given to it. And I highly suggest that if you have a word that you constantly associate with yourself, that you Google it, Google the definition of it, and then Google the origin of that word, because you may really end up laughing at what it really used to mean and how we have spun it or modified it to mean something else. And sometimes that's all we need is just a spin on how we see things, is just a way for us to modify how we talk to ourselves and how we talk to others, which inevitably could also open up and change your perspective. So I invite you to lean in with curiosity. No good or bad, no positive or negative, just neutral. Lean in. Get curious, which ends up making you a courageous being because you have the willingness to face whatever it is that you're dealing with. Know that the courage is inside you at all point in times. even when you feel weak. And you are a courageous individual because you have a willingness to face difficulty, danger, and pain. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode. I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on the words that I have shared with you. And I would love for you to share with me the words that you looked up and how you were able to spin or modify your feelings attached to that as well. And as always, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. So until next time, catch you later. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you love today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable